Hi everyone, Jordan here from Ferret Art Studios. I hope everyone's having a wonderful week. And yeah, I'm glad you guys have tuned in for another video. So this week we will be working with Liquitex acrylic paints, and I was actually applying it to black gessoed canvas. I've never really played with any of the black variety of papers or canvas, but recently I saw that there was a sale on a few black canvases, so I picked some up, and I actually really enjoyed playing with it. So I hope you guys enjoy.
So usually when I do my outlines for my paintings, I usually use either a charcoal pencil or Conte. And this was a situation where you definitely could see Conte a lot better, of course. Conte, for those that do not know, is just pretty much a white chalk. And I use it with my graphite drawings quite often. So what I did with this was I actually used my photo projector for a little bit of it, just so I can get the base outline done. And then, yeah, I basically started painting, and um, basically what you're seeing, not on the one that I'm working on right now, but like down on the arc of just like that like lower branch of flowers. Basically, what I do is I very roughly, as you can see, just try and get a basic shape. Like, just if you pay attention to what my blocks are right now, um, you'll find that once I start sculpting my flowers a little bit more and giving them a little bit more of a 3D feel, you'll still be able to see those harsh lines that I have kind of made right now, but it will just look a lot more smoothed out and blended. I think it's very encouraging for beginner artists to see the very choppy work of like the first steps of the progress, just because it can be very discouraging when you first start a drawing or a painting and you don't really think that it's going the way that you want it to be. And when you see other artists go through these, we call them ugly stages, and yeah, I just find that it will definitely help beginning artists push through that uh, really awkward part of just wanting to restart your drawing or your painting, um, and just push on through to the finished stages. So if you have seen my one of my previous videos, the painting I did, it's called Camouflage. I used the same brand of canvas as I am using in this video. I'm using Artist Loft canvas, and that's just like one of the very cheap brands that Michaels carries. The only reason why I kind of bought it was because they were having a really good sale, and buying cheap canvas is always good for like practice reasons. But if you're really trying to take your painting very strict and going to do a commission, let's say, or if you're expecting to make some serious money off of that painting, I would suggest to actually spend the money and get a better quality canvas, because I gotta say I fought with this canvas a lot, um, and if it's a white canvas, I usually gesso it myself as well, even though it's already pre-gessoed. Just because I know that my gesso is a higher quality, and if I put a couple layers of that on, um, then I'm not going to fight as much, even though just for some reason this canvas does not really take too well to these paints. Like, there was little tiny areas that it kind of almost seemed like there was a oil film on the canvas. Just every time you would blend it, the paint would smear right off that area, and it took a lot of doctoring just to be able to layer it and build a pigment up. You can kind of see it right now on the flower that I am working on. Also, the few bunched up near the bottom, if you look closely, you would be able to see some dark spots within the pink. But also, since this was my first time working with a black canvas, I thought that it would actually be very good for beginners to play with, because if they are using certain pigments of paint, red being an example, it's very translucent. Um, the layering method that I use um, really shows on black canvas. So for beginner painters, I think that playing with a black canvas will really teach someone how many layers it takes to build up a 3D kind of feel to your painting. Um, I also find that white canvas is kind of easier to kind of brush unfinished subjects underneath the rug, just because with the white you will be able to get more pigment, and with the black it takes a lot more of a build up to be able to get the right pigments that you want to get within the canvas, unless if you block it out with white once before you start putting your colors in. But I just went right in. I started with my lightest values to kind of block in that like white tone usually when I am using white canvas and I have a really dark background, like the that kind of marbly background that I've had in my other paintings. um, I will white out my subject with white paint before I start putting all my colors down into the subjects. And that's just because I don't want to fight uh, the pigments contrasting against each other or bringing down the values of my colors. But with this painting, I just basically started with my lightest values and slowly worked down to my darkest. I am getting actually quite dark with my dark uh, values. I'm actually using a lot of purples down near the bottom of the flowers. It doesn't necessarily look like it because I'm glazing it on, which glazing is basically just watered down paint. There are things such as glazing mediums, but I've heard that they can manipulate the pigments of your paint. So just be careful if you do have one of those mediums. Um, I have had used one before just from college, and yes, if you do use a lot of it, it will turn your pigments very cloudy. So you only need like about a couple pin size uh, to add to your droplets of paint. You don't need a lot of it. Um, but for me, I just find that water works fine. And I have heard a lot of people say don't add water to your acrylic paints because it will cause chipping. Um, I have been doing this kind of painting for quite a while now, and I have not had any paint chip off of my canvas. And I think that maybe if you were buying very low quality paints, then yes, be careful with adding water in, because the just it won't it won't stick to your canvas like how a more quality paint will. A more quality paint will definitely be a little bit thicker than just like crafter's paint from the dollar store. Um, Even though I guess the paint that I use, I guess you can get in Walmart, for some reason it's just much better than any of those other uh, cheap paints. So this paint is still quite cheap. I think it's about $5 a tube. Um, and that's for like the smaller tube. That's not for the big tube. I haven't really purchased any of the bigger tubes, so sorry. I think it might be double. Um, but yeah, $5 for a tube. And if that's still too much, I would suggest just kind of buying maybe your primary colors and one white and one black, just so you can kind of start out. And with your primaries, you can basically um, mix up any color you want. Um, you'll just not be able to get much variety of different tones. But that's okay, because I find that when you're starting out, uh, a lot of beginner artists usually tend to overload themselves with different colors. I know I definitely did when I first started. I wanted to use every single color that I bought while I was in college, and I would pour all these colors down onto my palette, and then I would probably only use 3 out of them, out of like maybe 6. So I, like, half of those colors I would actually put down on the canvas. I wasted so much paint in college. Um, but if you can get yourself your primary colors, one black and one white, then you can be able to mix your any kind of color that you kind of need, and you can slowly add in your other colors after you get your primaries. And I think that's actually probably the smarter way of going about things. Um, you can always get a color wheel to kind of find out what shade of red, yellow, blue, and green that you can use that would give you the actual baseline um, mixing palette. And yeah, I would definitely suggest that's the better way to go. So the betta fish was actually something that I added in after everything was kind of done. Um, I was kind of just thinking of finishing once the flowers were done. But I threw a work in progress photo up on Facebook, and I asked you guys to comment and tell me what kind of fish you guys thought would look kind of neat in this painting. And thank you for the person who commented. Thank you, Shelly. She commented a betta fish. So I found a betta fish off of Pixabay, and I just kind of decided to change the colors. So I changed it to purple and white. And even though that I say white, um, I did not use much white within the fins at all. It was actually a lot of a kind of off-toned lavender. I actually used some blue within that color as well. The only time I used white, straight up white, was when I was done and I was adding in these like little dots within the fins. Besides that, it was very off-tone blues or violet colors it was never white until it was like the last finishing touches. And that's because you just really don't want to overboard it with those whites and blacks. Like, even for the pupil of the eye of this fish, I did not use black. I actually used um, uh, some kind of brown, burnt sienna, and then I just mixed my purples and reds together, and then I put some green in there. And that brought it down to this like kind of muddy color. Anyways, the fins, I kind of treated it as if though I was doing hair, but instead of being very coarse with it, I took my filbert brush and I smoothed it out, um, just to kind of make it look a little bit more connected and a little bit more blended out. And mostly, I just found that the trick uh, to the fins, the long tail fins at the back, was just to kind of keep your motions and your lines in the direction that your reference photo's going. You don't have to be spot on with how the fins separate and overlap over each other. You just have to be able to identify which way the lines are going. What I think makes a good fish is very, very high contrast. So you'll see that on parts of the body I almost have this lighter lavender color, and then on parts of the body I have this more um, toned down dioxine purpley color for the shades. I find it helps the overall shape of the fish, and I also find that it helps the fish look more shiny. Um, Another way that I find that it ways to make your fish look more shiny is to put in a few defining scales within the body and put some highlights within there too. You'll see that I do that here in a moment. And another is those dots I mentioned earlier. When I say that I did the tail fins like hair, I don't mean that I did like each individual toothpick strands every little centimeter. I did very controlled lines, directional lines, going in the same direction that my reference photo was going in. And that's what I mean by I was kind of going in the same pattern or technique that I use when I do hair.
And that is it for this week's video. I really hope you guys enjoyed. Next week is actually going to be a commission piece that I'm working on, so if you guys want to be notified for when that video is uploaded, you can hit the subscribe button and you'll be notified exactly when it goes up. Besides that, I will leave a few links in the description and you guys can head over there if you want to. It will just be for any of the social media websites that I'm on, my website. And I'll also leave one for Pixabay just because Pixabay is awesome for artists. So yeah, that will be down there as well. Besides that, I hope you have a wonderful rest of your week. And yeah, bye-bye.